And reading from Whispers from Eternity, I want to build a rainbow bridge of self-realization. The gulf of ages lay between thee and me, widening as the waters of my oblivion of thee grew through centuries. I stand on this rocky shore of matter, gazing out over the gulf, hoping to see beyond thy smooth shores of peace. My inner thought architect will build for me a bridge of constant remembrance of thee. The strong mental girders of self-control now are being riveted together. My dreams of thee gather to make a rainbow bridge of self-realization over which very soon I will reach thy shore. This particular Sunday reading is, the message of it seems pretty obvious. And to a certain extent, every time I come to this, I puzzle over it a little bit. But I suppose the desire to impose our beliefs on other people is an irresistible urge of human nature. We wish to affirm the rightness of our own position by persuading others that it's true. And more generously, we have a desire, if we're enjoying something, we want others to enjoy it as well. But the path of true spirituality emanates from inside of us and absolutely cannot be imposed from outside. So the Gita gives us these instructions about who should not hear about the spiritual path. Those who lack self-control, those who lack devotion, those who are unwilling to serve others, those who are smugly self-satisfied with whatever they already have, and those who are mad at God, who feel that he's not doing a good job, and if they were in charge, they would run it differently, which is quite understandable. There was a little girl in our community. Her ambition was to be the empress of the whole world, which seemed like a very valid thing to do, especially when you're a small child. I had another encounter with another very strong-minded Ananda-born child, and she was dressed up for Spiritual Renewal Week or something like that. She was about 6. And she was dressed up in an very beautiful Indian costume, and I said, "Oh, my dear, you look just like a Rajputani princess." I don't know where that came from, but I just made it up. And she said, "No, I'm not." I said, "Yes, dear, look at you with all your sparkles. You look like a Rajputani princess." She said, "No." And then after a moment, she said, "I'm a queen. Princesses have no power." I admired her for having figured it out so early. She was the same child that I said, "Oh, happy birthday. How old are you? Are you 7? She said, "No, I'm 8. No one would think I was only 6 now." Sometimes children reveal what is hidden within us, but they just guilelessly put it out there in front of us. So the Bhagavad Gita tells us who should not receive the teachings. So why don't we reverse that and talk about those same qualities in the positive sense as to why they qualify us to receive these teachings, and how then we can work to meet the right criteria. The first one that Master talks about, Krishna talks about there, is self-control, which is interestingly in the Whispers that I was just reading. There I am standing, gazing across the gulf between myself and the divine shores of peace, and what I'm riveting together are the steel girders of my self-control. Isn't that interesting? This is this paradox of the spiritual path, where on one hand we talk constantly about surrender and receptivity and devotion and all these more feminine kind of qualities, the qualities that are soft. But then the rainbow bridge of self-realization is born of the power of self-control, and the first criteria for someone who is not qualified to receive or practice these teachings is the lack of self-control. So there is an element of stalwart determination that is absolutely essential on the spiritual path. Willpower. That's why Master created for us the energization exercises and made them a cornerstone of our path. Because until we have an element of self-mastery, the power of the flow toward materialism, toward delusion, toward the natural instincts of the physical body, toward the emotional habits of centuries, all of this will just pull us away. They say on the spiritual path, if you're not going forward, you're going backwards. That this is the single, I would call it the most annoying aspect of the spiritual path. And it's this strange inner conflict that we have to gradually sort out, which is, on one hand, our relationship with God is from eternity, has never changed, never will change. Divine Mother is loving every one of us equally, and yet unless we exert every ounce of our willpower to keep our attention focused on that reality, we just drift away from it, just into oblivion. Even when we sit and try to meditate, when time is set aside, when there are no other responsibilities, and all we have to do is concentrate on the breath, concentrate on the mantra, concentrate on the flow of energy, do the Kriya practice, bringing energy up through the chakras, the mind just goes here, there, and everywhere. Swami Kriyananda tells the story of his own cousin, who her firstborn child had a hole in her heart when she was born. And so there was a period of time when they were very frightened about whether or not the child was even going to live. And Swamiji's cousin just spoke to him with tears in her eyes. She said, even at such a moment, she said, when I was praying for the life of my firstborn child, my mind would wander. And my mind would wander into things like, I wonder what I should cook for dinner. So you lay out cooking dinner next to the life of your firstborn child, and there's nothing in you that considers them equal. But without the habit of concentration and of discipline and of drawing our mind from the peripheral to the central, it's impossible to practice these teachings. And without the ability to at least try to do that, the teachings don't make any sense. Because look at the world around us. It's so obviously real. Look at the values of the world. They're so obviously right. How could so many people be wrong? Our whole educational system, all the smartest people in the world are training people systematically to be unhappy. I mean, how could it be so misguided? It takes a tremendous amount of determined effort. And I'm not just talking about, how much ice cream you eat or even how many hours you give to meditation. I'm talking about the constant understanding inside myself that delusion is always trying to take me over, and I must be constantly attentive to the very idea, just the fundamental premise that this is not, what is day to the worldly man is night to the yogi. That's the premise that we have to understand. There has to be a commitment to redirect our energy. That's why the energization exercises that Master taught us, which is we use our physical body to train the will to choose where our energy is going. And that leads to where our emotions are going, where our thoughts are going, where our desires are going. That we can say, as a conscious act of will, I gather my energy and I focus it in this direction. Now bear in mind, we don't have to be good at it. We just have to believe that it's necessary. And if you're trying to talk to someone who thinks that they can just have and do whatever they want, and why wouldn't I? The basic principle of our world to a large extent, or I should say, there are two forces happening in the world right now. One of them is exactly what I'm describing, that we have to pull our energy away from our basis instincts and lift it up toward our aspiration. And the other is just racing toward those base instincts, just the sexualization of things, the overconsumption, the idea of how much is enough. You know, how much power do I need? How much money do I need? How many pairs of shoes do I need? There's it's told, this story of one of the richest men in the world. I believe he's the man who invented the duty-free shopping centers in the airports. That's what I'm told. And he's famous for living in such a humble manner. And he literally has one pair of shoes because, as he pointed out, he has one pair of feet. I mean, even we are now, this is being recorded in the end of July in 2020, and as I opened my closet, you know, to get dressed this morning, and I saw the number of shoes that I have, which is more than I have feet. I'll just leave it at that. But I just thought, you know, there's so many strange things happening when you're as sheltered as I am now, which is, I don't wear my shoes. And I just thought all the different ways that all of the economy everything starts shifting, you know, and I look at that and I think to myself, why do I have so many shoes? Well, I used to go to different places and do different things, but did I really need all of that? You know, but the premise is, at least I'm thinking that way. If I'm not good at it yet, I understand the principle. And the second principle, that the lack of it disqualifies you for spiritual path, is devotion. And by that, what Krishna is talking about is the willingness to open the heart. Because even as Sri Yukteswar said, on the spiritual path you have to want. You have to want the divine. It's not enough to theoretically imagine that the idea of self-realization might be attractive under some circumstances to some people. As Swamiji puts it so simply, you can be living next door to the most delicious restaurant in the world, but if you aren't hungry, you won't even cross the sidewalk. And so there has to be something inside of us that longs on a level that isn't just intellectual, that is restless and is never content, because there is this gaping hole inside our hearts that we begin to sense will not be fulfilled in any way but by upward movement. And of course, devotion is what gives us the power of self-control, because devotion is the feeling, and feeling is what motivates us. Thinking, again, just about the simple fact of being hungry. If you don't feel hungry, it really doesn't matter what's in front of you. It's attractive, it's nice to look at, you're happy that people made it, but if you don't have appetite, then you won't be moved even to put it into your mouth. And so we have to have an appetite for the divine. There has to be something in us that is suffering, that feels some level of misery, even if at first we don't know what that misery is. And that misery is, it's not necessarily that you're depressed and unhappy, but there is this deep feeling that I long for something. And often what we long for is we long for love. We long for the opportunity to love. We may also long for the desire to be loved, but also it's the longing to love that often moves us. As a child, as a young person growing up, I found the spiritual path before I was 20. So I really basically just grew up and then found my path. But I had such a desire to give myself to something. Just the idealism of youth, to find something that I could really believe in, that I could give all my energy to, that would not disappoint me. I wanted to be a devotee. I wanted to have something to be devoted to. That's what devotion is also. It's not just the feeling of love. It's high aspiration. It's idealism. I remember when I arrived at Ananda village for the first time, which was in August of 1970. And I met Swamiji. I had already met Swamiji not quite a year earlier. And I went to Ananda Village, and it happened to be the last days of Spiritual Renewal Week, I think. Yes. And I remember it was hot summer. Summers were very hot and dry, and there were no paved roads, and all of the roads were just this really fine red dust, which, with all the hems of all your trousers and all your skirts would gradually get this sort of brown edge to them after you lived up there for a while. But I remember opening the car door, and I wore these leather sandals that were kind of biblical looking, which just made it all the more, and it lent a sort of dramatic touch to the image. I remember opening the car door and setting my bare foot in that leather sandal onto that dust. And as I put it down like that, the dust rose around my foot. But just as that happened, an inner voice said to me, "This place is true, and it will never disappoint you." And that was like the deepest fear of my heart, was that it would not prove true. I had this complete trust in Swamiji, but I just didn't know. And there I was, and I just touched the soil of Ananda, the holy ground of Ananda, I'll call it. And so that devotion, that heart which had been held, because where could I give it? All of a sudden, I felt that I could. Now, the third quality that disqualifies you from receiving the spiritual path is an unwillingness to serve anyone but yourself. And again, now these are the intuitive understandings that are necessary on the spiritual path. I am part of a greater reality. Share with others as we have shared with you, for you are part of all that is. This is the message of the divine that comes through the Festival of Light. I am part of all that is. And therefore, protecting and separating this small self does not serve my destiny. What serves my destiny is to open and to give. And so if people are still hoarding, miser-like, for themselves, and can think only, if I get it and it's mine, I'm going to keep it. How to make myself secure is to pile up more and more for myself. I had this strange, just sort of completely uncharacteristic flash at one point. I really don't even know what caused it. I was thinking about money, about having money, needing money, and I had this sudden desire. There's this sort of closet, this kind of deep closet that goes under the stairwell in the house where I live. And I had this sudden desire to have that room be filled with valuable things. I wanted jewels, I wanted gold, I wanted to be able to walk in there and see a lot of valuable stuff. And it was sort of like God just like opening some past life of mine, I don't know. But also just, I had that feeling, like, oh my God, that must be what people feel like. They must feel this like, I want more, I want to hold it, I want to have it. But there comes another part of us where we realize that all of these treasures will not really make us secure, because the power of God can just, go right through it. Just take everything away from you in flood and in fire and in nuclear disaster or whatever it might be. Just all of that which we cling to can just be just vaporized, just like that, or stolen by unscrupulous reality. That the only thing that really makes us secure is the presence of God within. And the only thing that really gives us joy is to serve God in everyone. Because that is the freedom and the security that we're looking for. It's not to fix everything and hold it like this. Just makes ever more tension, more anxiety about all those things in the closet, wherever they might be, and it's never going to be enough. But when we completely just let go of that and realize that everything that belongs to the infinite is mine. Many of us at this stage of our life, I often think about this, I didn't maximize my earning potential in this incarnation, really. I didn't. And so there we are. A great many of us who gave our lives to God did not maximize our earning potential. And I know there was a conversation, I remember many years ago, we got together and we thought, what are we going to do? And what is Ananda going to do for us? That was the conversation. And I'll give credit where credit is due. Nitai was in that conversation. And he said, he said, I have served God through Ananda, but it's not Ananda. Ananda doesn't owe me anything. He said, I've given my life to God. And if at the end of my life, God decides I have to live under a bridge, he said, and beg for my food, I will trust that that is what is the fruit of my lifetime. And I just have always remembered that. Every time those fears come to us, and nowadays things are quite insecure. We really don't know where it's going. But the fruit of a lifetime of living for God is the joy of living for God. Who knows what will come of it? But what choice do we have? This is who we are. This is what we were born to do. And if we don't understand that serving others is serving God, serving others is serving ourselves, then these teachings won't make any sense to us, and there's no point on it. And the other side of it is the more we can live that way, the more that God will come into us. And it also, another disqualifying factor, according to Krishna, is that if you're just self-satisfied, just as you are, I'm just fine, just the way I am, what do I need of anything else? I often say to myself, I hope this is not the apex of happiness. This is pretty good, but I'd like there to be a little bit more. And every time we sort of run up against God giving us big challenges, big karmic lessons, sort of flipping over the basket of our comfortable little world, we finally got it all set up, and then he just flips the basket over with one thing or another. I ask myself, was I perfectly happy before? Can I even imagine something greater than what I already know? Do I have faith that Divine Mother is with me? But can I even imagine something greater than I already know? And if I can, why would I mind if God starts weaning me from the narrow and opening me to the greater? There was a pop psychologist, I use that phrase, sort of in that way, and he had a wonderful aphorism that I love. If you defend your limitations, the reward for that is you get to keep them. So there we are. If we're going to cling to who we already are, cling to what we already have, well, there's not much that God can do for us. He'll just let us keep doing it. If we insist that this is the most we can ever experience of the divine, that this is good enough, then we get to keep it. I made the mistake once with a relative of mine, an older man, and I was trying to encourage him to a broader understanding. And I said, as if it was so self-evident, don't you want to grow? He said, no. Just like that, no. I've had enough trouble in my life. Basically said, I just want to hunker down and last to the end. It was just exactly the Gita moment. I shouldn't be saying this to you at all. It's not that you're self-satisfied, it's that you're not able to think beyond. So I'll leave you until your experience gives you something else. Then the last disqualifying factor is a very interesting one, which is that we are mad at God. That we blame others and we blame the divine, and we're just not interested in hearing it. If I were God, I would run it differently. How can there be a divine plan? Look around, look at what a mess it is. That are angry at the way the world is, instead of deeply trying to understand how to change myself or to change it. There's no place for that. Now, all of us have our moments. God knows we all have our moments where we just, really? Is this really what's going to happen? Is this really what we have to go through? Is this really your plan? Can I talk to somebody else? Is there no other option? So we don't have to be perfect in these. I remember once that I was mad at God and Guru because I knew I was going to have to grow. That made me madder than anything, that eventually I was going to have to face this. If I thought I had a choice, I wouldn't have been so irritated. But I knew I didn't have a choice. So it's sort of like the way lovers quarrel, but not really. It's like, you know that Divine Mother's taking care of you, but still, we can protest a little now and then. Is there another choice? But thy will be done. But deeply in our hearts, we're not angry at all. We have nothing but gratitude. Master said Divine Mother doesn't appear to most people because she knows most people just want to argue with her. And that's a very profound way of putting it, isn't it? I want it to be different. Please, can't it be different? I really think this one of your laws is really a bad one. Have you ever considered amending it to make it just a little more favorable to delusion? Perhaps if we could talk about this. That's just how we are. But it's inexorable. There's just this very fine line of divine attunement. It's a single note. When you're singing a duet, like some of our beautiful singers do sometimes, they don't sing a note close to the note that harmonizes. They have to find the exact tone. And when they find the exact tone and the two voices go together, there's just nothing else like it. Well, the divine is always singing an extremely exact tone. And what we find is the closer and closer and closer we attune to that, the more and more blissful we feel. And Master tells us, and Swami tells us, that all the Masters say that when the game is over, when the veil is dissolved, and when we stand in the truth of our own nature with the divine, it never occurs to us that it wasn't worth it. All we can feel is that bliss, and we can see everything that led us there was perfect. That is, for many of us, only an act of faith, but it's faith based on the experience we've had so far. Every time I step into it, every time I surrender to it, every time I say, Divine Mother, whatever you want, the joy that comes is so much greater than when we don't. When we find that tone, that exact tone, and sing it with her. God bless you.
Through many lives, I've drunk the cup of laughter. No man could tell the pleasures I have known. The stars in the endless sky, if one could count, would come to billions. Yet as vast as are their numbers, so many years I've wandered far from you. Yet as vast as are their numbers, so many years I've wandered far from you. Through many lives I've drunk the cup of sorrow. No man could tell the bitter tears I've shed. The drops in the endless sea, if one could count, would come to billions. Yet as vast as are their numbers, so many years I've wandered far from you. Yet as vast as are their numbers, so many years I have wandered far from you. Through countless lives, I've sought your cup of sweetness, found other cups, yet thirsted evermore. The streams in the hills of time all found their way into a desert. Every noon of bright fulfillment, ere many hours did sink to evening gloom. Every noon of bright fulfillment, ere many hours did sink to evening gloom. I long for you in summer and in winter, only for you my heart thirsts day and night. I've learned that the sweetest songs ears ever heard were but your echo. Lord, at last fill me completely, for nevermore I'd wander far from you. Lord, at last fill me completely, for nevermore I'd wander far from you.